Glorious, precious root Guru, please sit above my crown on the lotus moon seat. Care for me with great kindness and grant the cities of body, speech, and mind. The Dharma expanse palace of Akanishta is the essence of all Buddhas. Of the 3 times who shows me directly, my mind is Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious exalted Guru. Please bless me and all beings that our minds become the Dharma. Please bless us that the Dharma become the path. Please bless us that the path dispel confusion. Please bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. Now please think to yourselves that we are teaching and listening to the Dharma this afternoon in order to bring all of our mothers, all sentient beings throughout space to the completely perfect state of Buddhahood, and let's listen with the motivation of bodhicitta. And the Dharma that we are listening to is the way of the Bodhisattva by the great being Shantideva. And in this text, there are, 10 chapters, and we're discussing the 8th chapter, the chapter on meditation. So the chapter on meditation begins after a short overview of the chapter. There is the link to preceding chapters. There's discussion. There's a discussion of gaining solitude of body and mind, and then there are the meditations on relative bodhicitta. So we're speaking about the sections on gaining solitude of body and mind, and have come to the passage on. We've spoken about this gaining solitude of body, and we're speaking about the passage on the solitude of mind. And so here, what we're speaking about primarily are the thoughts that we have once you've gone into retreat that distract you from your meditation. How do you overcome those? And generally, often those thoughts are because we're in the desire realm. They're related to desire. Now, another aspect of this, because we do sometimes have thoughts of anger or pride or jealousy or other afflictions that come up when we're in retreat. And so then you might have the question, why are these not being spoken about? Why are we only speaking about desire in this chapter? There are a couple of reasons for this. The first is that, after ignorance, then desire is the one that the emotion that the attachment desire is the emotion that, or the affliction that then leads to all the other. You aren't angry over something if you're not attached, right? No attachment, no anger. And also no pride. And if no attachment, no hatred, no anger, and all the other afflictions, and none of the other secondary afflictions. And so for that reason, that's one reason. But another reason is that when you think about the different afflictions, like you have the afflictions of hatred and then anger and so forth come out of them, well, they've already been discussed in the 6th chapter on patience. The affliction of stinginess has already been discussed in the chapter, in the discussions of generosity early on. Now, there's not a separate chapter for generosity, but it is discussed at a couple of points. And so likewise, pride and so forth and laziness are discussed in the other chapters. Laziness is a big topic in the 7th chapter on diligence. And so for that reason, the other afflictions all have passages dealing with them in them. So we need a particular passage to deal with them in the context of the work of this particular work. So he's going through all of the different afflictions. So that's another reason why it's discussing primarily desire in this passage. And in terms of this passage, we're primarily talking about desire, and that's here, it's primarily sexual desire, because we're just in the desire realm, and so we've got 2 main desires, food and sex, basically. And so here he's talking about the way you do this is that traditionally taught is that you overcome it by meditating on repulsiveness, understanding that all bodies, your own and your attractive person's bodies, are all the same on the inside, in being, bags of filth, sacks of filth. This term, the sacks of filth, is actually found in the sutras. The Buddha uses this term to talk about the nature of our bodies as being sacks of filth. That whatever you put in comes out as disgusting. Even if it's not changed much, but we'll get to that in a little while. There's a specific verse about that. And the other important point is that when we're here, of course, it's based on earlier in the chapter, you had a little bit about on the meditation of repulsiveness for your own body, when we're talking about the solitude of body and leaving the world. There's this portion there where he meditates on his own body, similar to the bodies in the charnel ground. Well, here it's meditating on someone else's body. Now, there's a very, very important point here. You don't walk into a bar and say to someone, "Hey, you sack of filth." Not even if you don't, I mean, you don't even walk, I don't even walk into a bar. You don't go up to people and say, hey, I'm meditating on how repulsive your body is. No, don't go there. This is private, right? Meditation in general is private. It's for you. It's not something you show publicly. I mean, especially if you're a lay practitioner. There's no point in making a spectacle of yourself. Now, sometimes if you've taken monastic vows, it's different. The Buddha taught us as monks and nuns that we wear monastic robes, and it's kind of like, you know, they call it the banner of the teachings, and it serves a purpose for letting other people know that we are monks and nuns, that we've gone forth, and that therefore we're, you know, someone that you can be generous to, someone they can ask questions of, and so forth, and that's a purpose. But if you're a lay person and you go around wearing all sorts of Dharma bling, you know, no point. Sorry. There's the point is not to make a spectacle of yourself. I once was in Bodha and there was this big guy. He was well over 6 foot tall and not small in girth. He arrived carrying this huge duffel bag, and I happened to be waiting for someone else in a guest house. I had to speak with the manager of the guest house, or the guy who was Tibetan. I had to speak with him, and this guy came in. Later that night, he had transformed from his, you know, he had transformed into his Ngakpa self, and was sitting outside by the stupa in Bodhanath, wearing a bearskin mask and white robes, doing chö in the middle of this, you know, and this is something that when you go to Asia, you see a lot of, you know, tantra practitioners who sit in various places doing chö in the evening. And sometimes, you know, they've got a little cloth out to earn, you know, to get some donations and so forth. And some of them are probably good practitioners. Some of them are probably just in it for the donations. Well, this guy was here. And there was I was walking through the stupa and there was this huge crowd, and there was this big Inji doing chö, singing the melodies, you know, with the bear skin, or with the bear skin, not skin, the bear hair, the mask, and all of the accoutrements, big white, huge mala, even bigger than mine. You need to go in the cave for a while. Eat some nettles. Why are you doing this in public? So we're not doing it for public. Our practice in general is for ourselves, to improve our minds and to feel better, and to you know, as we were speaking about this morning, you start out by making steps in your life that make you clear and better able to deal with your life. But the focus is, how can you become enlightened? How can you become just totally fine with everything? An ultimate level to be resting in that nature. This is private. And some meditations are more important to keep them private than others, and this is one. But you can do it. I mean, you can actually do this meditation. You can think about it. When you find yourself getting attracted to someone, you can think, wait a minute, what's their body like? What's my body like? And so that's this body. So we better get back to the text. Share screen. There it is. So we have come to verse 57. So basically, when we're thinking about other people's, or well, about anybody really, but we're attached to other people's bodies, we think they are clean. We've got the 4 errors: thinking that the unclean is clean, the not self is a self, the impermanent is permanent, that suffering is pleasure, right? So the first of these, the error of thinking that the unclean is clean. So we're fooled by the everything that people do on the outside to make themselves look good, plus Photoshop to make your Instagram influencer. And we're attached to that when inside, you know, you don't want to look. Why does your mind, addicted to filth, neglect the fresh lotus flower blooming beneath the cloudless sunlight and love instead a cage of filth? So why are we attracted to these beings who are to other beings? You know, If you say if you want something clean, well, get something that really is clean. You've got a lotus flower. It even smells nice, and it's just a beautiful flower. But instead, you're attracted to this cage of filth that all it does is excrete more filth. So the other point is, like, one of the things that we find most disgusting is excrements. And the next couple of next verse speaks about that. If you have no desire to touch a place fouled by excrement, why would you want to touch the body out of which it originates? I walked by the sewage treatment plant last night. This is like a joke, right? I walked by this. So yeah, I mean, if you're downwind of it, it's not so bad. If you're upwind, you can smell it. Do you like that smell? Do you find it attractive? Do you think that this is the most beautiful sewage treatment plant in the country? It might be. And that's not even seeing the sewage itself. We look at you see that you deposit it in the toilet and then you flush it. And you hope that the toilet gets clean so that no one else can see any traces of it. Is there a brush by this toilet? You want to get rid of it. And so the other person, again, it doesn't matter what sort of person, what gender they consider themselves, we all poop. We all make a mess. So why do we find that we don't find what comes out of the body attractive, but we think that the body is? So that doesn't make any sense. So you might say, well, we aren't interested in the people for their poop. It's not like you fall in, it's like you have such nice poop, darling. No. But there are other qualities. So if filth is not what you desire, then why do you embrace another? Why would you embrace another person? The field from which they were born was filth, as were the seeds, as was what grew them. So here what we're saying is that human beings come out of a place that in ancient India was considered inherently unclean. From the whole body, the whole inside of the body is unclean. So if the whole inside of the body is unclean, then of course the uterus is also unclean. And so that's the field from which they were born, the uterus. And then there are the seeds. Well, what are the seeds? Well, they are in ancient India. They didn't have microscopes. They couldn't see the ovum and the sperm, and so they thought, or the sperm. So they thought it was the blood and the semen, the mixture of the two. Well, if we clean those up when they spill, right? We don't think they're clean. We clean them up, right? There's something we have to clean off of ourselves. So those are also, and particularly in ancient India, they were also considered filth. So those were the seeds, the sperm and the blood, or in contemporary way of looking at it, the ovum and the sperm, as were the seed, as was what grew them. And so what grew them here refers to the placenta. Now I know that some people think of placentas as being nourishing and all that stuff, but in ancient India it was considered unclean. So the body that we have, not only is it unclean on the inside, but it also grew from a place that was in ancient times considered unclean. And even in modern times, if any of it spilled, we would clean up because we thought it was getting dirty. So this is, I mean, even if you're going to take, even if you're going to, what do you say, freeze your placentas to eat it on the first year anniversary of your child being born, sorry, the wrong word. Even if you're going to do something like that, which you're fine to do, I don't care. If you want to do something like that, you're still going to make sure that it's all clean and wrapped in something and you put it in the freezer so it stays, right? And that you clean up the area where it came out. If you didn't think it, why would you bother to clean it if you didn't think it was dirty? You do not want the unclean worms born from manure, even though they're tiny, and yet you want what's born from filth, a body of plentiful filth by nature. So this is the same thing. The body is born out of filth. So it's no different than if of course, in ancient India, they would defecate in the open. And so, people would see that worms or maggots would grow in your excrement. This is just what people say. You go out and you see that there were things growing in it, because for other creatures, it's not filth, it's food. So they would grow in the excrement. And so, but those, we think of them as being disgusting because they grow out of manure. So why do we think that this body that's also growing out of filth and that is filled with filth, why would we think that that is more attractive? Not only do you not revile yourself, whose nature is unclean, you want another bag of feces, voraciously desiring fill. Because it's like we're not satisfied with all the filthiness or all the uncleanliness within our own bodies. Instead, we want more with another being, because we don't realize that that is the nature underneath the veneer of skin. And another reason why we can see that the body is unclean is that when you look at, if something comes into contact with any of your bodily fluids, then we automatically say that it is unclean. As it says in this verse, when you put some nice camphor and such, or even rice and vegetables inside your mouth and spit it out, the ground is dirtied and polluted. So camphor it's a kind of resin that comes from a tree, and it's got a nice scent, and it also has some uses for keeping bugs away. It's often used in scents, so it's considered clean in India. And food, if you have rice and vegetables, you put them in your mouth. They're clean until you put them in your mouth. Then once you spit them out, they're no longer clean. No one else wants them. If you spit them on the ground, then the ground itself is also dirty. You have to clean it up. If you spit them on the floor, even if you hardly chewed them, you still have to clean it up. So we were actually talking about this at lunch. And Tracy remembered Khenpo Choephel giving a hypothetical example of a nice buffet, all sorts of food, and there's some nice fruit. And you go by and you pick up one piece of apple and you put it in your mouth, and then you put it back on the tray. If someone else sees them, they're going to be horrified, right? That's the hypothetical example. Here's the real story, the true story. I think it must have been 2009, 2000. I think it was the last time Rinpoche went to Germany, and I was traveling with him. And there was a Kamalashila, the Kamalashila Dharma Center in Germany. It's near Cologne. It's in sort of just in the hills. It's a beautiful spot, kind of near the Belgian border. Nice area, good retreat center. And they were doing a program on Chö, in the Chö practice. My second time mentioning Chö today. So this time everyone's doing it. It was a very nice teaching, and we were doing Chö. And the last day we did Gana Chakra. Of course we did our Gana Chakra. This is what you do. And so in the Gana Chakra, then, all of us monks and people in Rinpoche's party were sitting there. And then all the people who were attending the program, and they came by and they brought all of us in Rinpoche's party, they brought us all our own little individual plates of Gana Chakra, the offerings, including some shortbread. I like shortbread. It comes time to actually eat the feast, eat the Gana Chakra offering. I take a piece of shortbread, I put it in my mouth, I bite, I pick half, and I put the other half back down on the plate. Chewing was nice, I have another piece of something else. And then, they start chewing the chant. So I leave the Gana Chakra there because it's done. And usually what happens is they bring it up to your room or something, but that's not how they did it at Kamalashila. So they take all of the Gana Chakra offerings and they put them all on a big plate, and then they brought them back to where all of us people in Rinpoche's party were served our meals. Like they're serving tea and something. And a couple of days later, we were sitting there having tea, and there's like, there's the Gana Chakra. Would you like some? Rinpoche's nephew, Tenzin Norbu, reaches over and he picks up a piece of shortbread. He looks at it and he says, "There are teeth marks in this." And I'm sitting there, but he's looking right at me. I don't remember if he ate it or not. So the moment the only part there's only my teeth that touched the very end of that. He could have broken it off, but it was disgusting, right? So the moment you put something in your mouth, and this is probably, I was going to say it's the cleanest part of your body, but it's probably filled with all sorts of bacteria. Frankly, the cleanest thing that comes out of your body is probably your urine. And we're not going to drink that. I'm not planning on it. Anyways, I better move on. Okay. back to this. So that's that stanza. So continuing on the same vein, even though it's evident, you doubt that this is so unclean. This meaning your body and the body of your lover or Instagram influencer. Then look at other fetid bodies discarded in the charnel grounds. So you go to the place and you look at them and you watch how they are and look at how they decompose. Look at how the animals come and eat them. What happens when they are described, because our own bodies and other people's bodies, human bodies, are all essentially this similar in their makeup. You know, we've got muscles and organs and phlegm and bile and all these other things inside, and it's all essentially the same. So if you understand it for other people's other corpses, when you see other corpses, then you see that that is your own nature. So, and when the skin is flayed from it, you know you will be terrified, and yet how is it you are still attracted to the very same thing? So you look at other corpses in the charnel ground, you meditate on them in the charnel ground, you see that this is their nature. And then you look at the body of your favorite Instagram influencer, and it's going to be exactly the same thing. So how is it you are still attracted? They're the same thing. If you look at it and you realize what it actually is by its nature, there's no way you could really be attracted to it. And another thing we do with our bodies is we often guss ourselves up. We put on scent, we put on jewelry and so forth. We make ourselves look good. As it says here in verse 65, the fragrance applied to the body is nothing else but sandalwoods. Why does the scent of something else allure you then to someone else? So in ancient India, they used sandalwood was a popular scent, but they had other scents that they also used. So here it's kind of like, I don't know, Chanel No. 5 or your Old Spice after. What was a favorite? You know, what is it? That samsara fragrance. You've got your nice perfume or aftershave that you put on to make yourself smell good so that other people, in particular your favorite Instagram influencer, is going to find you attractive. And when your favorite Instagram influencer, of course, this is a bad example because you never meet them in person, but there's that person you're interested in, when they put on some nice perfume or aftershave or whatever, and you smell, it's like, oh, or you get to catch a whiff of the shampoo from their hair or something like that. So, oh, it's attractive. But that's not that person. What do they naturally smell like? You put that on in order to cover up your smell. Now here in 21st century United States, we all do everything we can to hide our body odor. We wash frequently, we use deodorant and all sorts of stuff to keep ourselves from smelling. But of course, in ancient India and especially in old ancient Tibet, they didn't have the same thing. Even in present day India, people are much more fragrant than they are in this country. So it's something harder for us to understand. But when you're like, if you ever go to India and you are on on a bus or anything, you're on public transportation, you smell the other people. And it's just a normal smell, but it's not necessarily a nice one, unless they're putting on, there's some people who load on the perfume, the guys who put on a lot of cologne or something like that, in order to make themselves nice. But actually the scent of the body, if you don't do something to cover it up, is not very nice. As it says, is it not best to be attracted to this which naturally smells foul? Why do the worldly pointlessly craving perfume it with nice fragrances? So this body, you put on all these things to hide the smell, but actually you can't really hide it. It's the nature of the body. So this is written here about fragrance, perfumes, aftershaves, colognes, whatever you're going to do. Or if you're a hippie, if you're going to put on lots of, what is that? Began with a T. Patchouli, yeah. Yeah, the old hippies remember. They probably wore plenty. So, any of these things, it's the same. You're putting on something, the scent of one thing, something else to make yourself more attractive. And if we find that scent attractive, why that's not the person. You might as well go and enjoy yourself with a perfume bottle. But this also applies to jewelry, as Paolo Trengwa says in his commentary. He wrote it. The jewelry that decks your body is nothing else but gold and silver. Why does the jingle of something else allure you then to someone else? So you put on, it's kind of a rough translation, I just made it up. But basically, if you if you put the jewelry on, it's the same thing with jewelry. If someone's wearing like nice dangly earrings or a nice big ring, gold ring, you're attracted to that gold ring because it means that they're wealthy. Or whatever it is that they're wearing, that attracts you. Maybe they've got nice piercings. I don't know. And if you find that attractive, that's not the person. It's a piercing. It's a jewelry. It's not something else. So you have to be careful. What is it that's actually attracting you to that person? And look at that, because what is their nature and what are we looking at? The whole point of these meditations is that actually anytime we're perceiving any other being, we're not actually seeing that being. We are seeing our own projection of that being, our own idea of what that being is, what they look like, what they are. I mean, you can also read about this in contemporary neuroscience and psychology. You've got the light reflects off the being, and certain frequencies of this stimulate our retinas and all the rods and cones, and then some image is created in our mind. So, and that image in the mind is not reflective of all the light that is reflected off that person, of all the sensory, it takes a subset of it. And we kind of put it in together in this idea that looks like color, we perceive it as color and so forth. And whether there's actually color or not in the external object is a very good question. And sometimes science will say that actually the object itself does not have any color. It's just a question of which frequencies of light does it absorb and which ones does it reflect. And then we interpret those in our minds as being a certain color. That color that we're seeing is actually a projection. Similarly, so when we look at another being and we see that being as being attractive, someone we want to get together with, that is entirely our own projection. So this is what happens, you see, when we have problems in relationships, problems dealing with other people. At first, you're really attracted to someone, you want to be with them. Then because it's such a passionate affair, it blows up. And then you look at that other person and you feel totally revolted by their look. What happened? I mean, it hasn't been that long. It's a short and passionate affair. And then you have a short and passionate breakup, right? And during the short and passionate breakup, the person is like you don't feel attracted to them at all. Nothing changed. I mean, yes, everything changed about that other person, but they essentially look still pretty much, they may even wear the same clothes and so forth, but you just see them completely different because your mind is different. So when we're perceiving someone else, what we're seeing is not that other person. What we're seeing is our own projection. We projected our own ideas of attractiveness onto another person, and then based on that, we then feel attraction to them. So it's all a mistake. So by doing these meditations to look at what the nature is on a somewhat deeper level, not an ultimate level, when you're doing a repulsiveness meditation, it's still a fairly coarse level of looking at reality, at other sentient beings. But it's a little bit more, a little bit more profound than our ordinary worldly way of thinking. This is something that comes up at the beginning of the next chapter. There's stages of yoga, and repulsiveness is better than worldly, but it's not as good as some of the later styles of meditation, but it's useful. So it helps us break through those projections we're putting on other people. That's why we do it, because when we overcome our projections, then we can overcome the afflictions that are based on those, or that we develop out of those projections. If that sweet scent of sandalwood, what is it here the body emits? Why would you be attracted to someone because of something? Oh, wait a minute, isn't that the same verse we just had? Oh, no, it's a different one. Okay. If that sweet scent is sandalwood, what is it here the body emits? Why would you be attracted to someone because of something else's scent? So if you're attracted to sandalwood, I think I've already pretty much explained the meaning of this verse, but when you're attracted to someone because of the scents they wear, then that's not the person. That's something else that you're attracted to. And if you don't do anything to take care of the body, for example, actually the body itself naturally becomes pretty disgusting. For example, if you could do it in Maine in the summer, but not hard to do it year round. If you were to just stop taking care of your body, stop wearing clothes and go off in the woods, don't do anything to care of your body, no combing your hair, no brushing your teeth, no nothing, no bathing, forget about bathing, not even go swim. After 5 or 6 months of this, what's your body going to look like? Your hair is going to be long. Oh, as it says here in verse 68, this body naturally has long hair and nails, stained whitish teeth. It reeks bespiered with grimy muck. If naked, it is terrifying. So, you go and you don't do any self-care, no body shop for you, no Neutrogena. You're just going out in the wilderness and letting your body do what it naturally does. You come back into civilization in 6 months or a year, people are going to go, whoa, because what happens to your body? This is the natural condition of the body. If you don't do something natural here, it means something that you haven't done anything to alter. So if you let the body do what it's going to do and don't do anything to clean or comb or brush teeth or anything like that, your hair is going to get long and tangled, unless you have really, hair like mine, which is too, just never going to tangle because it's too short, too fine. Long nails, grimy, curly nails. Half of them would be broken from scrabbling over rocks or whatever you're doing. Stained whitish teeth because you haven't been to the dentist. You missed your 6-month checkup. And it reeks bespiered with grimy muck. If naked, it's terrifying. Someone comes out there and they take off their clothes and you see this like stained, kind of dirty body. Are you going to be attracted to it? It's not. It's dirty. It's disgusting. So go take a shower. Then we'll think about whether you're attractive. Right? That's what we think. But actually, that's the natural condition of the body. So why do you toil to polish up what's like a sword that injures you? So why would you take the effort to clean your body and do all this if in the end, actually all it's going to do is create suffering? By putting so much attention into appearance and making ourselves look good, making ourselves attractive, looking good for other people, looking at other people, watching how they do it and finding them attractive or not. What does this do? It increases our desire. That harms us in this lifetime and the next. And I think for many people, the greatest problems we have in this lifetime come from our romantic relationships. Breakups, divorce, even if you don't even have breakup or divorce, just the difficulty of maintaining a relationship over a long period of time. It's not easy. It's a lot of work, and there's a lot of pain. And so for a lot of people, one of the biggest sources of problems is our relationships with lovers. We have to admit it. It's just this causes problems in this lifetime. Forget about whether you even then go on from it and do something stupid that's going to cause even greater problems. And just the fact that you're acting out of attachment, greed, lust, means that you're acting in ways that are unvirtuous, that then will create difficulties in the future. Those crazed by efforts of self-delusion have set the entire earth in turmoil. So it's we've deluded ourselves into thinking that the things that are not clean are clean, things that are painful are pleasant. Into the 4 erroneous ideas, not a self is a self, the impermanent is permanent. And deluding ourselves in this way, we get all sorts of desires, and these desires then come back in ways that harm us and that cause us difficulties. So this is the source of many of our difficulties. I mean, you can even look at it. I mean, the current war in Ukraine is a large part because of desires. People want something, and then many of the difficulties, many of the horrible things that are happening there are related to desire. That people are willing to get their desires at the expense of other people and of their lives. So the self-delusion that caused by our desires and our erroneous thoughts have set the entire earth in turmoil. Excuse me for a moment. Is seeing only skeletons in charnel grounds repulsive you? Can you like charnel towns that teem with animated skeletons? So this is when you go to a charnel ground and you see all the corpses and they're just skeletons. After they've all been reduced to skeletons, then if you find that repulsive, then why, when you go to a town that's filled with living people who are basically just skeletons that are animated by a mind, by the afflictions, and controlled by the afflictions, moving about under the afflictions' control, why do you enjoy that? You're actually just those bodies that are around the town are the same as the bodies in the charnel grounds. Now, the other problem with the desires is that they don't come for free. There's a price tag to them. That which in this way is unclean cannot be got without a cost, exhaustion from earning for its sake, and wounds in hells and other realms. So it is expensive to be in relationships. And you have to get that money for somewhere, and it comes from your work and your toil, unless you have a trust fund. So there's a lot of effort, and you have to do something to maintain it. Even if you have a trust fund, you have to do something to maintain it. And so you work hard to earn money, and then you spend it on various things in order to attract people and so forth. It's not free. And that's kind of on the outer level of the cost. And you will people engage in all sorts of behaviors that will then cause, killing or stealing or lying or so forth, that will then cause harm in the future. And wounds in the helms and other realms. So these are the difficulties that come from acting on our desires. And this is something that we can't really, we work to gain these desires, but we can never really enjoy them. So children aren't able to earn money. When you're too young, you don't know how to get a job. You don't know how to do work. You don't know how to do any work before you're maybe, in a traditional culture, you'd probably be put to work at the age of 6 or 7. Before then, it'd be hard to do it. There's a certain age where you get older to be able to scare away crows from a field. And that's the point when children were traditionally put to work. Even in New England, children are put to work at a certain age. These days, we send our kids to school, make them work to learn, but it's still kind of like having a job. They still have to do their work, and if they don't do it well, they get reprimanded and so forth. Then you have to go off and get a job. In youth, how is this happiness? So when you are young, and then you have to spend all your time working, and especially in ancient cultures where you had to do farming or other work that was really difficult. I mean, being a farmer is a lot of work, especially if you don't have, it's hard work these days. And imagine if you had to do everything by your own with your own power, or by steering a team of oxen or something like that. You use your life up gathering wealth. When old, what good are your desires? So you work hard when you're young in order to be able to enjoy something when you get old. And when you get old, you're too old to enjoy it. You work hard. You think you're going to do something. Like my grandmother always used to say, the golden years, ha! She spent her entire life saving pieces of wax paper. I mean, she would reuse them. She didn't save them and hoard them. The cereal box, you saved the wax paper that the cereal was in, and used it to wrap sandwiches to go to work. You were economical, you scrimped and you saved money, and she managed to do that. And then she got old. And even having money when you're old doesn't help if your mind is not there. You have to do something about your mind. So what good are your desires when you're old? The only thing that's going to do you good and old is what you have done to tame your mind when you were young. When you get too old, then it's difficult. I met someone whose husband was a airline pilot, dashing airline pilot, first for Lufthansa and then for Air Canada. He'd fly off to all these places. He swept her off her feet. They got married. And he went off and he kept on sweeping other people off their feet, spending losing all his money at the horse races and all this stuff, gambling all the money that he earned away. An airline pilot makes a lot of money, but this woman, she's a really impressive woman. And she had to do the job and support them because he was wasting all of the money that he earned. And at the end of his life, the day before he died, he said to her, "The only good thing I've done in my life was to marry you." It's like, isn't that a little bit too late? She said, she was thinking, I don't know if she said that, but she thought, it's too late. You're finally realizing after all these years. Do you want to be like that, where you think, I could have done something with my life, but I didn't? You get to be old. We have that chance now. We're all still in a position, even if you already feel like you're old, you still have time to do something if you take it. So we have to do it now while we have this opportunity. This precious human body isn't going to last long. We don't know how long it's going to last, but I mean, for all of us who are here talking or listening, the maximum that any of us who are listening have is maybe, if we're lucky, 50 years. And it could be tomorrow. And who knows who's going to go first? We can't plan that the older among us are going to go first because the younger sometimes go first. There's no certainty as to what's going to happen. So if we want to make sure that we're going to be happy if we manage to grow old, that we're going to be happy in the future, then we have to do something about it now. Some passionate and humble folk, exhausted by a full day's work, return home only to lay down their worn-out bodies like a corpse. So you work hard, you spend so much time working that you aren't able to actually enjoy life. This is particularly a problem for people who have intensive jobs. There are a lot of stories, or recently, a number of years ago, there was an Australian nurse who compiled a list of the regrets that people had. I don't remember what it was called, but I remember that one of the big ones, they worked so hard that they missed everything in life. They missed their children, they missed everything. They didn't catch any of it because they were too busy working. So you're working really hard and you don't have any time to enjoy life. You get home and you're so tired from your work that you get home and the only thing you can do is lie down and sleep. Others might go abroad and suffer from weariness and long, hard travel. They wish to see their wives and children, but won't see them for a whole year. So people will go traveling. And we still do. I mean, maybe it's not so much in our society, but there are a lot of people who emigrate from one country to another. And it's not always easy to emigrate, especially if you're going from a place like Eritrea or Sudan or wherever, and you're trying to go to some developed country where they don't want to let you in. You leave Guatemala because there's nothing you can do, and there's no food, there are too many people, and the climate's changing, there's not any water, you can't grow crops anymore, and so you want to come someplace where maybe you can, and you get stuck at a wall in Tijuana or wherever. It's hard. It's a difficult position for all these people. You leave your family behind, you have no idea when you're going to see them, and you might not ever get back. You might die on the border, die in the Mediterranean Sea or whatever. It's a difficult life. For many people. Most of us, I think, have fairly comfortable positions, but we have to remember that we're kind of the exceptions in the world. Deluded by want for their own ends, they sell themselves to help themselves, not gaining that they're driven by the winds of others' futile work. So some people sell themselves into slavery, into indentured servitude. Or they don't get anything to help themselves, or they get a job and some meaningless menial job doing futile work. Some sell their bodies and are put to work for others with no freedom. The women give birth under trees or in the wild wherever they can. So people live in these terrible situations where they are unable to really do anything to help themselves, all for the sake of trying to fulfill some desires. And this is what people do out of desire for something. Now, of course, on one level, we're looking at it, there are people who are in desperate circumstances where they came from. But they're often people who haven't had any contact with the Dharma, who don't have any way to help themselves. Even if they've had contact with the Dharma, they haven't developed the right sort of faith to be able to practice the Dharma. So these aren't Dharma practitioners. And they're people who deserve our compassion and our help. But why is it? What is it that's motivating them? It comes down to desire. So are we going to be kind of the same? Are we going to use our whole lives working on our desires and for not a whole lot of gain? Saying they want a livelihood, fools are duped by their desires, fear for the lives, or go to battle or enter servitude for profit. The people who have gone as mercenaries into various conflict and end up dying, as opposed to forget about earning a wage. They get killed, or they want something and they see no other way to get it than crime, and so they end up being punished for it. Some greedy beings get themselves wounded, while others are impaled on stakes. There are those who are gored by spears, and some are even burnt alive. So these are speaking about the punishments that people sometimes experience. They're beaten, they're whipped, they're impaled on stakes, they're beheaded or whatever, and some are burnt alive because they acted out of desire and did criminal activity or something. So know the travails of getting, keeping, and losing it make wealth a never-ending source of ill. For those whom greed for wealth distracts, there is no chance for freedom from the suffering of existence. I mean, you just think about how much time and mental effort do you put into your job? How much time and mental effort do you put into Dharma? Your job wants you there. Well, depends on your working hours. Let's say 36 hours a week. You've got enough time to get benefits. You want benefits, right? If you've only got 31 hours, you need to get over 32. Or I don't remember the numbers anymore. But I got to have over a certain amount of time in order to get benefits. You're putting all this time into it. When you're not there, you're worried about things that are going on at work. What problems you had? You're driving. You've got a long commute because everything in Maine is far away, unless you're living in Portland. But if you've got a paltry job, then you're not going to be able to afford to live in Portland. So you have to drive a long way. You're spending all this time in commute. Or if you're living in another place, you're spending all this time in traffic. People in many cities, you live really close. You live if people live in, I've spent a lot of time in Vancouver. You live in Richmond, you work in Vancouver. If there's no traffic, it takes you 15 minutes to get there. So if it's traffic, it takes you an hour and a half. And that's all about getting, keeping wealth, and then losing it. Then there's a problem for you lose it. The stock market crashes and people commit suicide, and all these things. So these are anytime you're worried about wealth, there are these three problems: getting it, keeping it, and losing it. So it's a never-ending source of ill. And when you're always focused on that, because you're spending all your time being greedy for wealth, for money, you're nurturing your desires instead of practicing the meditations that are going to free you from those desires and therefore free you from the suffering of existence. It's kind of the opposite of what you should be doing. If you're working with the goal of gathering wealth, then that goal of your working is therefore contradictory to the goal of the Dharma. The goal of the Dharma is to get rid of your desires. And here you're doing a job that increases your desires. So and I'm not saying this to say, thou shalt quit thy job. I'm not saying that, because as long as you're in society, you have to feed yourself and so forth. But you have to look at what your motivation for doing your job is. Why are you doing it? What are you looking for? Are you doing a job? And I know that most of you who are still employed have jobs that help people. Many of you are, work in ways that are caring for people, educating, and so forth. And so if you do these jobs with a good motivation, the motivation of wanting to make a connection to these other people, so that somehow, just by making that connection, even if you say nothing, especially if you say nothing about it to that other person, making that aspiration when you see them, when you're dealing with them, when you're treating them, or whatever you're doing with that other person, that you're making the connection that can bring them to Buddhahood in your mind, not in any word or visible deed, then that becomes a source of Dharma practice. This is how we bring our Dharma practice in. So I'm not saying you should quit your jobs. I'm saying you should be very careful about maintaining an appropriate motivation as you do them. And if you do that, and the paycheck is secondary to you, then it's okay. We have a saying in Tibetan, "Shuki jungna mudu ease." If it happens automatically, it's cities. It's just an accomplishment. In other words, if you get something, it happens kind of secondarily and it's not your main thing, then it's fine. It's not a problem. So if you happen to get, if you are doing something good for other people and they happen to give you money and that's not your main motivation, it just is like that, then that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. If something good happens to you, you can enjoy it. If you are attached to it and trying to make it happen, then it's a problem. The question is, are you attached or not? Is this what you were doing it for or not? Are you doing it out of desire? Or are you doing it out of benevolence, love, compassion, the Dharma question? That's the question. So when we talk, like this morning, we spoke about, I mentioned how His Holiness was talking about you can either be a Dharma person, a Dharma practitioner, or you could be a worldly person. Well, how do you make that difference? It's by your mind. Are you acting out of greed? Are you acting out of hatred? Are you acting out of loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta? That's how you make the distinction. It's not so much a level of the external, it's the mind. When you fix the mind and you have your motivation directed in the right way, your action of body and speech will automatically follow. It'll go in that direction because your mind is going in that direction. Conversely, you can be dressed like me and take monastic vows and so forth and keep them on an external level. But if your thought is red envelopes, get a nice meal from a sponsor, maybe they'll pay for business class on my next flight, and that's no point in wearing the robes. So it's all a question of your mind. For the desires, faults like these are plentiful, but gains are few, just as the oxen pulling a cart get only a few bites of grass. The sake of paltry gains so common that even oxen manage them, these perfect leisures and resources, which are so difficult to get, are crushed by the ordeals of karma. So if you have a lot of desires, then there are many problems that come, but it's difficult. It's like the oxen that are pulling an ox cart. If the ox sees a really nice, delicious looking bunch of grass and stops to take a few nibbles, then they're going to get run over by the cart. They're going to get smashed in the bottom by the cart. Or the driver of the cart is going to get the whip and whack them. They can't even stop to get a few they get one mouthful off of that really nice, nutritious grass, and they're hungry because they're pulling a cart. It's like that. The same for us. We stop and we get a little bit of desire, a little bit of pleasures, but similar to the little bit of a feeling of getting a nice bite or two of food, like the oxen having that bit of grass. But we're using up all the leisures and resources, this precious human body that's able to practice Dharma. And for the sake of these paltry gains, and in the end, the ordeals of karma, all the sickness, aging, death, all the difficulties that happen to us are going to destroy it all. And if we've spent all our time chasing these minor pleasures and not done anything to accumulate the cause of the future, benefit in the future, it's going to be difficult to get this again. For just a millionth fraction of the arduous efforts that they make continuously for minor ends, pleasures that definitely perish, and cast them to the hells and such, they could be Buddhas. But the greedy, instead of awakened conduct, have great miseries and no awakening. So I remember when I was, in the first few years when I was studying Dharma, I read quite a bit by different people in English. And one of the books was one by Tulku Urgyen. And in it, he said, if you want to achieve enlightenment, come stay with me for 12 years. So if you go to someone like Tulku Urgyen, or, well, of course, he's passed away, but if you go to someone like that, a master who has the instructions, who can give you the instructions, so give your time to Trungpa Rinpoche, to Khenpo Labu, to Tsolpani Rinpoche, or Khandro Rinpoche, whoever, and you really devote yourself to doing it. You spend 12 years doing it. You think 12 years is a long time. Well, how long did you go through school? If you go through school to get if you want to become like a doctor or a lawyer where you're going to really get a good job and to be able to support yourself, you have preschool, 12 years of primary school and high school. Then you have 4 years of college, 2 years of master's degree. Then you have your doctoral degree. Then you either have to take your LSATs and spend all this time studying for them, or you have to go through residency in a school. And you're talking about, people finishing, if you go through that schooling from beginning to end, or if you want to, even if you want to just get your degree in English literature, you're talking about getting your PhD when you're in your late 20s. So you've been studying from the time you're 3 years old until you're in the late 20s. That's how long? That's like 25, 26 years. All for studies for worldly things. If we put that same amount of energy as we put into our worldly education, into Dharma study and Dharma practice, where would we be by now? If we had started when we were that age, for example, in Bhaktapur at the Sekhar Retreat Center, they've got a bunch of little kids. Now, some of them are young monks from Nepal, but there are also a couple of kids, like 5 kids from Africa, some boys and some girls, now young monks and nuns. And there's a little kid who's like, last time I saw him, he was 2, so he must be 4 now. He'd been in the retreat center since he was like 18 months old. At the age of 2, he could recite the Vajra lineage prayer from heart. And he would sit, they did 2 hours of meditation every day. The little kids. So he'd be sitting there doing meditation. On the outside, looking the same as us. On the inside, who knows? Khenpo Rinpoche, Drupal Khenpo Labu Rinpoche had a long stick. And so the kids would start to squirm a little bit, and he'd kind of reach out and tap them. Not hit them, tap them. Wake them up. And they've been doing this every day. By the time, when I visited the retreat center in 2000, this must have been 2019, so I guess it's been longer than that. Wow, time flies. They'd already, all those kids had been in the retreat center for several months, 6 months, 9 months already. And they were sitting in meditation. And so when these kids get to be a certain age, and you don't have to worry, they get time to play, they enjoy themselves, they go outside and they play. It's really kind of nice to have the kids at the retreat center, actually. And they get education too, they have schooling and so forth, but they're there and they're getting this meditation education at a little age. So there's like this real chance that these kids, when they get to be the age that, if they're starting at 5 or 6 and go into their 20s and they keep at it, what are they going to be like then? So this is like using your education for the Dharma. We use our education in order to do worldly things, and we don't put the same. So our meditation ends up being something we do on the side. Some of us do more practice than others. And I know several of you do really devote yourself to practice. But in the general, you say, oh yeah, if you do 10 minutes a day, it's nice. 10 minutes a day, but you're already doing 9 hours a day of work plus your commute. Right. So where are we putting our time? To Did I already read these verses? Yes, I did, didn't I? For just a millionth fraction of the Vajra that may continue to minors. Okay, I did read that, didn't I? Okay, considering the sufferings of hell and so forth, there is no weapon, no poison, fire, abyss, or foe that can compare to the desires. So our desires, it's out of desires that you do things like sexual misconduct, killing, all of these things that we engage in that will result in us falling into the hells. And so they're actually worse because any worldly being, they can drop a bomb on us and kill us, but that's only a short period. I mean, if you are killed in a thermobaric bombs sent by or shot at you by the Russian military, you're going to die pretty quickly. It's a short period of agony compared to the hells. Even if they torture you to death over the course of 2 hours, it's a short period of agony compared to the hells. So the desires are far worse than any enemy that we normally have. Thus weary yourself of desires and rouse delight for solitude. So now, after speaking about all the disadvantages of desire, both desire for sexual desire for people and a desire for things, next Shantideva goes into this passage talking about the qualities of living in forest and retreat. Deep in a peaceful forest, free of quarrels and disturbances, on broad flat stones, delightful palaces, cooled by the sandalwood of the moon's rays, the fortunate pace fanned by woodland breeze, serene and silent, pondering others' weal. In empty huts by trees or else in caves, you may remain as long as you desire. The pains of getting and leaving, keeping left behind, you live without a care, dependent upon none. So when you go into the forest and retreat, and you are there, it's just like, there's no worry about it. You don't need to worry about desires. You don't need to worry about other people. There are no problems. You just stay. You meditate, pondering others' weal, meditating on bodhicitta, wherever you can. And because you have no desires, wherever you happen to be is fine. Under, you've in the evening, you're sitting under the moonlight, the cool rays of the moon that are kind of like sandalwood. That sandalwood is kind of cooling, and you just a delightful place to be in retreat. To freely act with no desires and without ties to anyone, enjoyable comfort of contentment is hard for even a prince to find. This is no one in the world can get a greater happiness than when you're off independent on your own, acting on your own in this. So this is the joy of solitude. So of course, it is a joyous, a wonderful thing to do when you're on retreat. It is pleasurable for yourself. That's not the main reason you go. There are also difficult things that happen in retreat, primarily because of our attachments. Or it can come up because of various obstacles and so forth. It's not always easy to be in retreat. In fact, it's often difficult to be in retreat. But once you kind of get through these, if you're really focused, if you are not distracted, and you're really pondering bodhicitta, then it's just a delightful time to be, in this beautiful location where you don't have to worry about anything. Palaces, broad flat stones, delightful palaces, as it says in the text. You don't need to have a big house. You don't need to have a big mansion. You don't need to have a graceful 19th century cottage on the water. Because if you're happy where you are, the pleasantness of being happy, being content, not needing anything, that's far better than having a big old house that you have to maintain and it's drafty in winter, and you have to fix this and you have to fix that. If you're just off in the woods, you're off in the forest or on the mountains or wherever, in retreat, and there's little to take care of and nothing to do besides meditating on bodhicitta, then what could be more peaceful and beautiful than that? So this is beautiful. This is actually one of my favorite passages in this whole work. The beauties of staying there, and it's like you think about it and rehear this. It's like I want to go, but I have to work. I don't think I'm going to get, I don't have a replacement in my job. So I can't go yet. But we make the aspirations, even if you're in your own job and you don't see a way you can get out and go, you hear about this, you think to yourself now, oh, this sounds great, but I can't do it. You can do it, but you have to take your time. The first thing is you have to make the aspiration. I would love to be able to do this. This sounds wonderful. I'd love to be able to do it. I make the aspiration that I want to be able to do retreat, that I want to be able to do this. Making that aspiration, whether it happens now in this lifetime or the next lifetime, if you make the aspiration, because you've made the aspiration, you've planted the seed and that seed will grow. You water with your continual practice. You make the aspiration, you water with a continual practice. It's in the fertile soil of meditating on bodhicitta. And it'll grow. It'll grow and eventually it'll come. So we have to look at ourselves. So for many of us, I think where we are on our lives right now, if we think, oh, I really have to go on a retreat, but I can't. You have to look. You might think you're ready to go, but if you don't really have the revulsion for the world deep inside, if you don't really have a strong motivation, it might be premature. Or it might be better to go do shorter retreats and try. See what you can do, like do some time at KDD or Crestone or wherever and get some experience, spend some time, leave everything for a few months or a month or two and go off and do a retreat. Crestone is a great place to do a retreat if you can deal with the altitude. It's a great place. So you can go and be there and be quiet. See what comes. You start out with a month, and maybe next year you'll do a few months. Then you'll end up like me. No, I've even done all that. I mean, I really haven't done much retreat. You'll end up like, but I went to Nepal for a month, and the next year I was hooked. I was back for a few months, and then I was moving over there. So when you get hooked, so it starts with something small, and then it can move on, or it doesn't. But if you have that motivation of, I want to be able to do it, and you really think hard about the defects of samsara, the preciousness of this incredible opportunity we have now, then if you keep those in the back of your mind always, and they kind of influence or imbue everything you do, then eventually your aspiration will work out. So this is the way to deal with it. I'm not saying you have to go off to retreat tomorrow, might be too early. You need to think about these contemplations now, because if you do, then you will be able to take those steps to do something that will really bring lasting benefit to yourself and to others. So I think that is enough for today. We've come to this section. The next verses start the meditations on relative bodhicitta. Don't look in the book. It's easier than looking on the computer. Yes. We are at that passage. So we do still have a little bit of time. So we have, if anyone has any other questions, whether online or in person, we can maybe take another few questions. Steve?
Since you're talking about retreat and going off on retreat, I'm wondering, are there examples of householders who, in a contemporary sense, who don't go on retreat, managed to make kind of significant gains in their practice without really leaving home?
Oh, yes. Yes. For example, some of the early students of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, I'm thinking of one in particular, and I'm not going to name anyone, but he took these thoughts to mind, heart, he practiced them, he was devoted, he was a lawyer. At Trungpa Rinpoche's urging, he got a law degree and became a lawyer, worked as a lawyer for many years. And when he had time, he would take a few weeks off and do some retreat, and he'd go back to work. And then he takes some more time off to do other practices. And over the course of the years, he's managed to do all of the major yidam practices and so forth. And you can tell he's someone who truly has taken Dharma to heart. So it's possible. There are a lot of people who take it to a certain degree. So any little amount, even within context, this is something that Rinpoche always says, any little amount that we do, even in the context of a working life, such as even for myself in a working life, where I don't have much time to do a retreat because I've got too much translation work to do. I can see in myself that there's a certain amount of improvement. Now there's a long way to go for me. And I can see for other people that they're taking steps. People who are putting the time into their practice are getting results. And this is, I think, there are people in this group, I'm sure, who feel the same way. You put the time in, you're going to get some sort of benefit out of the practice. Otherwise, you wouldn't keep coming back for year after year. But you have to take the time to do it, and you have to put the attention into changing your way of thinking, catching yourself when you're thinking in a worldly way, and changing your thoughts to thinking in a dharmic way. And this is continual because the worldly way, the difficulty of living in a household is that you are constantly surrounded by people who think in a worldly way. You aren't in a monastery where people are focused on the Dharma. Even if they're focused on the Dharma, it's still kind of worldly. You're in a household, you're going to work with people who aren't interested in Dharma, usually. You're in this situation where people aren't interested. They want to go out and they want to go have a glass of wine. They want to go do this. They want to go to a show. They want to do that. They want to distract themselves and enjoy themselves, which is all worldly stuff. So how is it that you made, so the difficulty in that situation is how do you maintain a Dharma motivation on the inside, but not upset people on the outside? As it says in the Lojong slogans, don't be outrageous. You know, don't go out there wearing a huge honking mala and, you know, making a show of yourself. But how do you be an ordinary person whose mind is no longer directed by the temporary pleasures that we think we want in this lifetime, but is instead directed towards the Dharma at the same time as you're engaging in a job? And I mean, for you in particular, and most of you here, your jobs are jobs that help people. You know, if you're a dentist or a massage therapist, as a teacher or whatever you're doing, you're helping. These are jobs that help. So how do you do those jobs and not get overcome by the worldly aspects that go along with them? Keep your mind focused on what's really important. So this means you need to really think about the four thoughts that turn the mind, the importance of bodhicitta, do the meditations in relative bodhicitta. Internalize those as much as you can, because those are what are going to make it possible for you to maintain a dharmic attitude in the midst of your daily life. But because a daily life is it's a worldly life that you're in, it's a difficult situation. Then when you can get some time, if you can manage like a month of leave, you can take a retreat from time to time. And do that. That would be beneficial as like a stepping stone. And then at some point you'll have to retire. And hopefully you'll still be healthy enough at that point to be able to actually really do some practice. And you'll be able to do it. But that, whether you're able to do it at that point, depends less upon your financial situation at that point, because you might think, oh, I don't have quite enough money in my IRA or my 401, whatever thing, you know, whatever tax code is. I don't even remember the numbers anymore. 401k, your 401k doesn't have enough money in it, and how am I going to deal? Well, if you are interested in it, you're not going to care if you really want to practice the Dharma at that point. So you do what you can. You see what you can do. When your motivation is focused on the Dharma, then your life will turn in a Dharma direction automatically. So you focus on your motivation now, and then follow that motivation where it takes you. Any other questions? Looks like no other questions right now. So I think that means that we should, what do we do? Well, once again today, I heard about, this morning, I heard about another person who passed away. Some people have heard news of other people who are going into hospice. We have other recent deaths who are connected to people in the community. And even there are lots of people who have no connection to us that we are aware of who have passed away. So I think it's important for us to do the aspirations for rebirth in Sukhavati. And I didn't organize anything on my computer before I thought I could do this. I should have gotten everything open. You've got them, but let's do them. We're going to do the prayers for Sukhavati in English. Hopefully this will be published by Dharma eBooks in a few months, if I can ever manage to just write an introduction and do all these supplementary stuff that needs to go to it. So we'll do the prayers for rebirth in Sukhavati, and then we will do the, oh, what have I got? There it is. Then we will do the prayer for Rinpoche's long life. Let me just put it all together in a simple way. Sorry, you guys have to wait with me. Oh, and all of you who are looking on your own, sorry. But you have the prayer for Rinpoche's long life, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to do something about some chants for next week. Okay. And then there's this. So I'm getting it all ready for everyone online up to the okay. So we'll first do the two Sukhavati prayers in Tibetan, which you have in your chant books, and then we will do them in English, and then we will do the long life prayer for Rinpoche, followed by the dedication of merit. The dedication of merit, if you want to say it in English with the melody, you have to learn it, and I haven't put that up yet. So you have to learn it. So the first line is easy because it's similar to the Shambhala translation. By this merit may we attain omniscience, right? The only difference is all or we. By this merit may we attain omniscience. Defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, and free is the second line. By this merit may we attain omniscience, defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, and free all wanderers from the ocean of existence, right? All wanderers from the ocean of existence, churned by great waves of birth, age, sickness, and death. Okay, so repeat after me. By this merit may we attain omniscience.
By this merit may we attain omniscience.
Again, by this merit may we attain omniscience.
By this merit may we attain omniscience.
Okay. Defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, and free. Defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, and free. Again, defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, and free. All wanderers from the ocean of existence.
All wanderers from the ocean of existence.
Again, all wanderers from the ocean of existence.
All wanderers from the ocean of existence.
Churned by great waves of birth, age, sickness, and death.
Churned by great waves of birth, age.
Churned by great waves of birth, age, sickness, and death. Okay. Churned by great waves of birth, age, sickness, and death. Okay. By this merit may we attain omniscience.
By this merit may we attain omniscience.
Defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, and free.
Defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, and free.
All wanderers from the ocean of existence.
All wanderers from the ocean of existence.
Churned by great waves of birth, age, sickness, and death.
Churned by great waves of birth, age, sickness, and death.
Okay, you got it. We'll be golden. All right. Namo Sar Sanje Nama Taira Yesujo Tuje Khenpo Dam Yundu Semba Tujen Tomama Sanje Jansen Pame Kordi Gor Dechi Motsar Patu Me Payi Dewa Chenje Chawe Shinkamder Miyu Dine Tsepe Jurmata Kewa Shengi Parma Chuparu Deru Chene Namte Shalom Chodeke Daki Munatavati Chodru Sanje Jansen Tamche Gene Drupar Jinje Abdu Tanyata Panchandriya Avoda is for Chodru Yawa Seje Gon Sodi Zola Jera Nagi Jusun Gesava Control Sumla Shubhamu Yahweh Dhamma Jurji Gewa Samjen Gunano Drogun Sanje To Jurji Geta Tamje Chitute Nagi Jula Min Jurji Jimni Dane Sozote Senemen Yamboda Sedru Sarun Jurji Namshi Sefer Jurmata Deva Shendu Kejurji Kene Heme Kachete Luten Deva Sanjesho Chanchu Tomne Jisiru Rupero Jenpa Demaho, how wondrous is the Buddha, infinite light, with the Lord great compassion on his right, great power on his left, all in the midst of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas beyond number. As soon as I pass on, may I be born without another lifetime in between, in that pure land of untold happiness and wonder that is called Sukhavati, and see the Buddha Amitabha's face. I ask all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions, bless me that my prayer may be fulfilled without impediment. Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of all times and all directions, please consider me. Rejoicing in the two accumulations, I offer all my merit to the jewels. Thus may the teachings of the Buddha thrive. I dedicate this virtue to all beings. May every sentient being reach Buddhahood. I gather all the virtues there may be, and ones of them may ripen in my being. May I be cleansed of the two obscurations, and then perfect the two accumulations. May I live long, be healthy, and increase in both experience and realization. In this life may I rise through the 10 levels, and when I pass away, may I at once be born in the pure realm Sukhavati. When I am born there, may the lotus open, may I reach Buddhahood with that same body. Once I've achieved enlightenment, may I guide beings forever with my emanations. O Sameya Shedambe Jutsini Chimete Bombar Kyove Nyamni Sundro Shagi Letzen Bate Wawe Pai Mebege Ledzujime Tawe Gegyan Shedro Shimungdo Shegi Yuratite Marketun Drubeluto Yonzo Bamawe Senge Kenito Shizo Jaran Yase Tuwa Shenam Daran Ransom Drupanam Gitu Daki Hasam Gewe Dentogi Jishen Mumbai Geme Drugyur Same Yeshe Dambe Jutini Chimete Bombar Chube Nyamni Sungju Chagi Lezen Batewa Wepa Nebegele Jime Tawe Gegan Shero Shingongdo Chegi Yurasite Marketun Drube Gungdo Yonzo Bamawe Senge Chenitzo Shet Jadan Jase Tuo Chenam Danaram Ranson Drupanam Gitu Daki Lasam Gewe Dentogi Jijin Mamba Geberu Jurjik. Between your hands, united in equipoise, you hold the vase of deathlessness that collects the nectar of the highest undefiled wisdom. Lord of life, omnitidus, grant auspiciousness. Far and wide you sound the roar of fearless view. Up to the peak of existence blazes your turquoise mane of the Dharma, scripture, and realization. You have perfected the physical strength of being learned, venerable, and accomplished. By in speech, I ask you to live long. By the power of the victors of their foremost offspring, of gods and sages and siddhas, and by the strength of the truth of my pure intentions, may my prayer be accomplished without any obstacles. O Sanam Tam Chesikani Domine Vedranam Panchene Keganachi Palatrupai Sibetsole By this merit may we attain omniscience, defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, and free all wanderers from the ocean